The morning sun had just begun to spill across Lincoln Street when David Okoro pushed open the glass door of Brew and Bloom Café. The bell above the door gave a soft chime, and the aroma of freshly ground coffee beans filled the air. It was the kind of cafe that looked perfect on social media, clean, modern, full of people tapping away on their laptops. But for David, this wasn't just another morning coffee stop. It was the start of something big. He had spent months building his tech startup from scratch, working late nights in his small apartment, skipping weekends, and pouring every cent he had into his idea. And today, he was finally meeting Mr. Langston, a respected investor who could change everything. David had arrived early. He wanted to make a good impression. He adjusted his navy blazer, set his laptop bag on the counter, and smiled at the barista behind the register. "Good morning," he said politely. "Can I get a caramel latte and one of those butter croissants, please?" The barista smiled back. "Sure thing." But before she could finish, a voice cut through the calm. "Hold on," said Tom Walters, the cafe manager. He was a tall man in his 40s with slicked-back hair and a tone that carried quiet authority, the kind that instantly made people shrink back. Tom looked at David up and down, his eyes pausing on his dark skin, his modest shoes, his laptop bag. Then, with a smirk, he asked, "Are you sure you're in the right place?" David blinked. "I think so," he said slowly. "I'm just here for coffee." Tom folded his arms. "We don't usually get walk-ins this early. Our tables are reserved for professionals and scheduled meetings." David frowned slightly. "That's exactly what I'm here for, a meeting." "With who?" Tom asked, his tone already skeptical. David replied, "Mr. Langston. He should be here in about 15 minutes. The barista hesitated, glancing between them. The other customers nearby had started to notice the tension. Tom gave a short laugh. "You're meeting Mr. Langston? The investor?" "Yes," David said calmly. Tom raised an eyebrow. "You're joking, right?" David's expression hardened. "Why would I be?" Tom leaned closer. "Look, I'm not saying anything, but we've had incidents. People pretending to meet clients here, using the Wi-Fi, disturbing paying customers. I just don't want to repeat." David exhaled slowly, trying to hold his composure. "I'm a paying customer. I literally just ordered." Tom shook his head. "Not yet, you haven't. Maybe wait outside until your friend shows up." The word friend came out drenched in sarcasm. For a moment, David said nothing. His jaw clenched. He could feel people watching, pretending not to, but definitely watching. Then he said, quietly but firmly, "Is this because of how I look?" The cafe went silent. Even the coffee machine hissed like it was listening. Tom scoffed. "Don't play that card with me. I'm just following policy." David nodded slowly. "Right. Your policy." Before Tom could say anything else, the cafe door opened again, and in walked a man in a tailored gray suit. "David," the man called cheerfully. "I've been looking forward to this meeting." It was Mr. Langston. Tom froze. The barista's mouth fell open. Langston shook David's hand with a wide smile. "Let's grab a table, shall we? I've heard good things about this place." David looked at Tom and said evenly, "I hope so." Langston caught the tension immediately. "Is there a problem?" he asked, glancing between them. Tom stammered, "Oh, no, sir. Not at all. Just a small misunderstanding." David didn't respond. He just followed Langston to the reserved table by the window. The meeting went smoothly, better than David expected. Langston was impressed by his pitch, his professionalism, his calm under pressure. But deep down, David couldn't shake the bitterness. The humiliation lingered, no matter how politely he'd handled it. When Langston finally left, David stayed seated for a while, staring into his now cold latte. He looked up and caught Tom watching him from behind the counter, pretending to be busy, but watching. David stood, walked over, and said in a calm, steady voice, "You misjudged the wrong person today." Then he left the cafe, sunlight reflecting off his laptop bag as he stepped back onto Lincoln Street, and into a world that was about to witness everything that happened inside that cafe. The next morning, the city was quiet, but David's mind was loud. He hadn't slept much. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Tom's smirk, heard his tone, "Are you sure you're in the right place?" Those words kept echoing like a broken record. He'd been disrespected before, sure. Overlooked. Stereotyped. But something about this felt different. This wasn't just about him. It was about every person who'd ever been treated like they didn't belong. He sat on his couch, laptop open, scrolling through Brew and Bloom's website again. Their mission statement flashed across the homepage. "At Brew and Bloom, we believe in diversity, kindness, and equality." He almost laughed. The hypocrisy burned. He picked up his phone and called his friend Maria Sanchez. She was a journalist, sharp, brave, and known for exposing hidden injustice around the city. "Hey, it's me," David said quietly when she answered. "What's wrong?" she asked immediately. He told her everything. Every word, every look, every ounce of condescension that came from that manager's mouth. Maria didn't interrupt, she just listened. When he was done, there was silence for a moment. Then she said, "David, you can't let this go." "I'm tired, Maria," he said. "Tired of always being the one who has to explain, to prove, to stay calm." "I know," she said softly. "But sometimes silence gives them permission. Let me help you. We'll do it right, no yelling, no drama, just truth. Let's make them face themselves." David sighed, rubbing his temples. "You think people will even care?" Maria's tone turned firm. "Trust me. They'll care when they see it." By afternoon, Maria was at his apartment with her camera gear, small, discreet, perfect for recording in public. "Okay," she said, setting it up on the table. "We'll keep it simple. You walk in, just like before. Order your drink. Be polite. If they treat you differently again, we capture it. Clear, raw evidence." David hesitated. "You sure this isn't going too far?" Maria gave him a look. "You didn't humiliate anyone, David. They humiliated you. We're just letting the world see what you saw." He nodded. They spent an hour preparing, making sure the audio was clear, deciding on camera angles. Maria would stay near the door, pretending to be a customer on her phone while she recorded. Then, at exactly 10:15 a.m., they left for Brew and Bloom. The cafe looked just as it had the day before, warm sunlight streaming through large glass windows, the smell of coffee and baked bread drifting into the street. But to David, it felt colder now. He could see Tom behind the counter, giving instructions to his staff, his posture smug and relaxed, like a man who believed he owned every inch of the space. David took a deep breath. "Stay calm," he told himself. "You're not here for revenge. You're here for truth." He pushed open the door. The bell chimed. Tom's head turned immediately. Recognition flashed in his eyes, followed by irritation. "You again?" he said, loud enough for others to hear. David forced a polite smile. "Good morning. I'd like to order a caramel latte and a croissant, please." Tom didn't move. "Didn't I ask you not to come back here yesterday?" David frowned slightly. "You asked me to wait outside until my meeting." Which I did. And that meeting went just fine. Tom crossed his arms. We reserve the right to refuse service, sir. That's store policy. David's voice stayed calm. On what grounds? Tom shrugged. We just don't want any more misunderstandings. David looked around. Customers were watching now, quietly, curiously. The barista from yesterday looked uncomfortable, frozen in place. Maria's phone camera, resting in her hand, was aimed perfectly at the counter. David said quietly, I'm simply trying to buy coffee, like everyone else. Tom leaned forward. Look, I don't have to explain myself. I'm asking you to leave. Because of how I look? Tom's voice hardened. Because you're causing a scene. David gave a small, disbelieving laugh. I'm not the one raising my voice. The cafe grew silent. Even the background music seemed to fade. Then, from a nearby table, a young woman whispered to her friend, he didn't even do anything. Tom shot her a glare, then reached for the phone on the counter. You know what? I'll call security. David's tone didn't waver. Do what you have to do. He stepped back slightly, crossing his arms, not threatening, just composed. Maria captured every second. Within minutes, 2 security guards arrived, both large men, clearly uncomfortable but following orders. Sir, one of them said, we need you to step outside. David looked around the cafe once more. Every eye was on him. Can you tell me why? The guard hesitated. The manager says you're trespassing. David's voice was calm but loud enough for everyone to hear. I came in to order coffee. That's all. I was denied service because of the color of my skin. And now I'm being escorted out. Is that what you stand for? A murmur went through the room. Someone pulled out their phone. Another customer whispered, this is wrong. Tom tried to look unfazed, but his jaw twitched. We don't need troublemakers in here. Maria finally spoke up from the corner, her voice steady. You might want to watch your tone, sir. This is being recorded. Tom's eyes snapped toward her. What? Everything you've said, she continued. It's all on camera. The guards froze. One of them took a step back. Tom stuttered. Why you can't record in here without permission? Maria raised an eyebrow. You'll want to check the state laws on public interactions. This isn't private property, it's a public business. David said softly, you could have just served me my coffee. The silence that followed was suffocating. Tom's face had gone red. He turned abruptly and stormed into the back office, slamming the door behind him. The guards looked lost. One of them mumbled, Sir, you're free to go. David nodded, thanked them politely, and left, with Maria following right behind. The door closed behind them, but the eyes of everyone inside stayed glued to the window. That afternoon, Maria edited the footage on her laptop. She didn't add dramatic music or flashy effects. She didn't need to. The truth was powerful enough. The title read, They denied him service for his skin, caught on camera. The video showed everything clearly, the tone, the dismissal, the power imbalance, and the quiet dignity with which David handled himself. Maria uploaded it to her channel. At first, it got a few hundred views. Then a few thousand. By evening, it had crossed 50,000. By midnight, over 200,000. The comments were pouring in. This is disgusting. I've been to that cafe before, they treated me the same way. How does this still happen in 2025? Respect to David for staying calm. That's grace under fire. By morning, #JusticeForDavid was trending on social media. David woke up to dozens of missed calls and messages. Friends, strangers, and even local reporters were reaching out. He opened his phone and saw the video, millions of views now, people sharing it across platforms, tagging news stations and demanding accountability. But what struck him most were the personal messages, from people he'd never met. "Thank you for standing up. I've been through the same thing, but I didn't have the courage to speak. You reminded me I deserve to be seen." For the first time in a long time, David felt something shift, not just in himself, but in others too. Meanwhile, at Brew and Bloom, chaos had erupted. Tom had arrived that morning to a flood of angry emails, negative reviews, and customers canceling their reservations. The owner, Elaine Brooks, a woman in her 50s with sharp features and a businesslike manner, stood in front of him holding her phone. "Tom," she said coldly, "what did you do?" "I didn't do anything," he insisted. The guy was making trouble. Elaine slammed her phone on the counter. "You humiliated a customer. On camera. In my cafe." Tom stuttered, "It wasn't like that." "Save it," Elaine snapped. "The news is calling. Do you realize how bad this looks?" He swallowed hard. "It's all over the internet?" Elaine glared. "Front page of every local feed. And corporate wants an explanation by noon." For the first time, Tom looked nervous. He sat down, head in his hands. "I didn't think anyone would care." Elaine sighed, pacing. "You didn't think, period. And now we might lose everything." That afternoon, David received an unexpected call. It was from Channel 9 News. "Mr. Okoro," the reporter said, "we'd like to interview you. Your video has started a citywide conversation on racial bias in businesses. Would you be willing to share your experience on air?" David hesitated. He wasn't seeking fame, he just wanted fairness. But he remembered what Maria said, silence gives them permission. So he agreed. The next morning, David sat under bright studio lights. Cameras rolled. The interviewer smiled gently. "David, you've become the center of a national conversation overnight. How do you feel?" David took a breath. Tired. But also hopeful. "I didn't post that video to attack anyone. I just wanted people to see how it feels, to walk into a place, just wanting to be treated equally, and be told without words that you don't belong." The interviewer nodded. "What do you hope comes from this?" David looked straight into the camera. "Change. Not anger. Just understanding. And maybe the next time someone walks into a cafe like that, they'll be seen as a customer, not a threat." The clip aired that evening. Within hours, it went viral again, this time on national television. By the end of the week, Brew and Bloom Cafe released an official statement. "We are deeply sorry for the incident involving Mr. Okoro. The manager in question has been suspended pending review. Brew and Bloom is committed to retraining our staff to ensure every guest feels welcome." It was the kind of apology you'd expect, polished, safe, but forced. Yet, the real change was visible on the streets. People were talking. Other businesses began hosting Everyone Belongs campaigns. Some even reached out to David, offering collaboration opportunities for his startup. Maria smiled when she saw the news. "You did it," she told him. David shook his head. "We did it. You just turned a moment of hate into a movement of awareness." She grinned. "That's what stories can do." That night, David sat by his window, looking out at the city lights. He thought about that first morning, how small and invisible he had felt. Now, the same city that once looked away was finally watching. He whispered to himself, maybe this is what justice looks like, not loud, but seen. He didn't know what would come next, but he knew one thing, he would never be silent again. For the first time in his life, David Okoro's name was everywhere. On Twitter. On TV. In newspapers. Even strangers on buses were talking about him. The clip, that quiet, powerful moment inside Brew and Bloom Cafe, had exploded far beyond Chicago. It had been shared by celebrities, activists, professors, and people who had never even heard of him before. But what caught everyone's attention wasn't the anger. It was David's calm. In the video, he didn't yell. He didn't curse. He stood still, with quiet dignity, and said the one thing that pierced hearts. "You could have just served me my coffee." That line was being quoted everywhere. Printed on t-shirts. Posted on murals. Shared in TikToks. 2 days after the video went viral, protests began outside Brew and Bloom. Dozens of people stood on the sidewalk holding signs. "Everyone belongs. We are all David. Serve justice, not hate." Some brought musical instruments. Some came just to stand in solidarity. And as TV crews arrived to cover the growing crowd, Maria and David watched from across the street. Maria held her camera low. "You see this?" she whispered. David's voice was soft. "I didn't ask for all this." She smiled faintly. Sometimes the truth doesn't ask for permission. It just shows up. They stood together, silent, watching the cafe that once humiliated him now drowning in public attention. Inside, behind the glass, Tom Walters, the manager, could be seen pacing nervously. His once confident posture was gone. Every time he peeked through the blinds, cameras clicked. That same day, Elaine Brooks, the cafe owner, held an emergency meeting in the back office. Tom sat across from her, sweating. His hands fidgeted on the table. Elaine's voice was low but sharp. "Do you realize the damage you've done?" Tom opened his mouth. It wasn't about race. She slammed her hand on the desk. "Then what was it about, Tom?" He stammered. "I just thought he looked out of place. I didn't know who he was." Elaine glared. "That's exactly the problem. You judged him." Tom sank into his chair, speechless. Elaine continued, "We've lost 3 major clients. Half our regulars have stopped coming. We're trending for all the wrong reasons. Do you know how many emails I've gotten calling us racist?" Tom muttered, "Maybe it'll blow over." Elaine shook her head. "It won't. Not this time." Her assistant entered, whispering, "Ma'am, Channel 9 is outside asking for a statement." Elaine sighed heavily, then looked back at Tom. "Stay out of sight. You've done enough." He nodded weakly and left the room. That evening, Chicago's main news station opened with a headline. "Discrimination at Brew and Bloom Cafe, manager suspended after viral video." The reporter's voice played over clips of the protest crowd. Then it cut to a short interview with Elaine, who stood at the cafe entrance looking composed, but tired. "We're deeply sorry for what happened," she said carefully. "The employee involved has been suspended. Brew and Bloom does not tolerate discrimination of any kind. We are taking immediate action to ensure this never happens again." But online, no one was convinced. The comments flooded in. "Too little, too late. She's only sorry because the cameras showed up. Apologize to David directly." Meanwhile, David kept quiet. He hadn't posted anything new. He ignored interview requests. He avoided reading comments. He just wanted peace. But peace wasn't easy to find when your face was on every screen. He tried to walk through downtown one morning, wearing a hoodie and sunglasses, but people still recognized him. "Hey, you're the guy from the video," someone called. Another person shouted, "Respect, man. You handled that perfectly." Some asked for selfies. Others simply nodded at him with quiet admiration. The kind that said thank you for saying what I couldn't. That night, he called Maria. I didn't mean for it to get this big, he said. Now it feels like I'm carrying something heavier than me. Maria was editing another video at her desk. You didn't start this, David. The truth did. And it's changing things. He was quiet for a moment. You think it'll actually make a difference? Maria looked at the screen, where comments of support scrolled endlessly. It already has. 3 days later, another video surfaced, one that shocked everyone even more. This time, it wasn't David or Maria who filmed it. It was a cafe employee, the same young barista who had looked uncomfortable during the confrontation. Her name was Tina. She had quietly recorded part of the conversation between Tom and another staff member after David left the first day. In the leaked clip, Tom could be heard saying, "You can't let just anyone sit here. You know what kind of crowd that brings. We have an image to maintain." And then, laughing, he added, "People like him don't buy lattes, they cause problems." The recording spread like wildfire. This time, there was no room for excuses. No misunderstanding. The discrimination was clear, in his own voice. News outlets replayed the clip alongside David's video, creating a timeline of events. Public outrage hit a new level. Brew and Bloom's official accounts were flooded with angry messages. Sponsors cut ties. Delivery partners suspended their contracts. Elaine Brooks held another press conference, this time visibly shaken. She said, "We are terminating Mr. Walters' employment effective immediately. We are also launching a full diversity and inclusion audit across all our branches." But the damage was done. Tom's face became a symbol of prejudice. And David, without saying a single harsh word, had become the symbol of quiet resistance. What began as one cafe incident turned into a citywide discussion about hidden bias. Radio stations debated it. Schools discussed it. Churches mentioned it in sermons. The mayor even addressed it in a press conference, saying, "Chicago stands for equality, and we must all do better in the small moments, not just the big ones." David's name was mentioned again. But this time, it wasn't as a victim. It was as a reminder that dignity speaks louder than anger. Maria's inbox overflowed with stories from people sharing their own experiences. A young woman wrote, "I was kicked out of a store for looking suspicious. Your story gave me courage to speak up." An older man messaged, "I've been silent too long. Watching David stay calm made me want to stand tall again." Maria read every single one, her heart heavy but hopeful. Somewhere across town, Tom Walters sat alone in his apartment. His phone buzzed nonstop, but not with support. He'd been fired, his face plastered all over the news, and even his friends had stopped answering his calls. He turned on the TV, and there he was again, on every channel, every headline. Manager fired after racial discrimination scandal. Caught on camera, the cafe incident that sparked change. He stared at the screen, face pale. He tried to justify it to himself, "I didn't mean it that way. It was just a misunderstanding." But deep down, he knew. He remembered the look in David's eyes, calm, but disappointed. And that quiet sentence, "You judged the wrong person today." For the first time, the words hit him differently. Days passed. The online buzz slowly turned into a wave of real-world movement. David's startup, which had been struggling to get noticed, suddenly drew attention from major investors, not because of pity, but respect. People saw in him something rare: composure, vision, integrity. One afternoon, he received a message from Mr. Langston, the investor he had met at Brew and Bloom. Langston wrote, "David, I've seen everything that's happened. Your strength under pressure is exactly what leadership looks like. Let's talk again, this time about your future. David smiled at his phone. For a moment, he just sat quietly, letting the weight of it sink in. The same cafe that had rejected him had unintentionally opened the door to everything he'd been working toward. Maria uploaded one final follow-up video titled, "When Truth Speaks, What Happened After Brew and Bloom?" In it, she said, "Sometimes the world changes not through protests or anger, but through quiet courage." David didn't fight back with rage, he fought back with grace. And that grace exposed what words alone never could. The video ended with a single image, David walking away from the cafe, sunlight on his back. Within weeks, other people began sharing their own videos under the hashtag #ServeEveryone. Business owners started publicly pledging to treat every customer with equal respect. David was invited to speak at community events. He didn't give long speeches, just honest words. "I'm not special," he said at one event. "I just refuse to let disrespect define me." If we all did that, calmly, consistently, the world would have no choice but to change. The crowd rose to their feet. Later that evening, David stood by his window again, watching the city lights. Maria's words echoed in his mind, sometimes silence gives them permission. But now, he understood something new. Silence wasn't always weakness. Sometimes it was the sound of control, of strength, the power to choose peace when the world expected rage. He whispered to himself, "You could have just served me my coffee, but instead, you served the world a lesson." He smiled faintly. Justice hadn't come with noise. It came with truth. And truth, once seen, can never be unseen. A full week had passed since the world learned David Okoro's name. The protests had calmed. The headlines were shifting to new topics. But for one person, the storm was far from over, Elaine Brooks, the owner of Brew and Bloom Café. On a quiet Thursday morning, David was working from home when his phone buzzed. It was an unfamiliar number. He almost ignored it, but something made him pick up. "Hello," he said. A pause. Then a soft but firm voice answered, "Mr. Okoro, this is Elaine Brooks, owner of Brew and Bloom." David sat up straight. He recognized the name instantly. His expression tightened, but his tone remained polite. "Yes, Ms. Brooks. I know who you are." Elaine exhaled, the tension in her voice clear. "I'd like to meet with you, if you're willing. Not for the media, not for show. Just a real conversation. Face to face." David hesitated. "About what?" She replied, "About what happened. And what I need to say, in person." There was a long silence. David stared out the window, the same window he'd looked through the night his life changed. Finally, he said quietly, "All right. But it has to be on neutral ground." 2 days later, they met at a community center in South Loop, the same place where a local youth charity had invited David to speak. The center's hall smelled faintly of coffee and cleaning supplies. Elaine arrived early, wearing a gray blazer and simple makeup. She looked older than before, not because of age, but because of exhaustion. When David walked in, she stood immediately. Their eyes met, two people tied by a moment that neither could undo. "David," she began softly, extending her hand. He shook it, his grip firm but not cold. "Ms. Brooks." They sat opposite each other at a round wooden table. For a few seconds, the only sound was the hum of the ceiling fan. Elaine broke the silence first. "I want to start by saying, I'm sorry. Truly. What happened in my cafe was wrong. There's no excuse for it." David listened, expression steady. "I appreciate that," he said. "But apologies don't erase pain. They start conversations, not end them." Elaine nodded slowly. "You're right. That's why I didn't want to do this through a press statement. I wanted you to hear it from me, no cameras, no scripts. She reached into her bag and pulled out a handwritten letter. I wrote this after watching your video. I didn't send it, because I felt words weren't enough. But I need to read it now. David gestured for her to go on. Her hands trembled slightly as she unfolded the paper. Dear Mr. Okoro, I watched how you handled the worst kind of disrespect, with grace I can only admire. I built Brew and Bloom believing it stood for warmth and inclusion, but that day we became the opposite. You reminded me what real strength looks like, calm, quiet, and dignified. I failed you. My business failed you. And if you'll let me, I want to make it right, not just for you, but for everyone who's ever been treated as less. She looked up, eyes glassy. I mean that. David was silent. He folded his hands, taking a slow breath. Ms. Brooks, he began gently, when that happened, I wasn't angry about the coffee. I was angry that someone looked at me and saw a problem, not a person. That's what hurt. Elaine nodded, a tear rolling down her cheek. I can't change what was done, she said softly, but I can change what happens next. She straightened her back, gathering her composure. I've shut down that cafe branch for renovation, she continued. When we reopen, I want to dedicate it to inclusivity. Art from local Black and brown artists. Workshops about bias training. I'd like to name one of the walls after your words, you could have just served me my coffee. David blinked, surprised. You'd really do that? Yes, she said firmly. And I'd like you to be part of the launch, if you're willing. David leaned back in his chair, processing everything. A week ago, this woman was the face of a business that humiliated him. Now she was sitting across from him, offering a platform for change. It would have been easy to reject her. To stay angry. But something in her eyes told him she was sincere. Not perfect, but trying. He finally said, if it's real, not performative, then yes. I'll help. Elaine's shoulders dropped with relief. Thank you, David. Truly. He smiled faintly. Don't thank me yet. Let's see how you follow through. A few days later, they stood together in front of a small crowd, local reporters, community members, and employees, outside the newly painted Brew and Bloom Café. The walls gleamed with fresh white paint. Above the door was a new banner. Everyone belongs here. Elaine stepped forward to the microphone first. She looked around, then said, 2 weeks ago, this cafe became a symbol of what's wrong in our society. But today, I hope it becomes a symbol of what can be made right. I failed a customer, and a fellow human being, because I didn't look closely enough at the culture I built. I want to thank Mr. Okoro for giving me the chance to do better. She stepped back slightly and gestured toward David. He approached the mic slowly. The crowd grew quiet. When I walked into this cafe the first time, he began, I just wanted a cup of coffee. Instead, I walked into a lesson, one that's been shared across the world. But here's the truth, this isn't about me. It's about what happens when we stop seeing each other. If we can rebuild from that, if we can choose kindness instead of pride, then maybe we'll finally start serving humanity the way it deserves. The crowd applauded softly, not the kind of applause for entertainment, but the kind that carries respect. Maria stood nearby, recording the moment. She zoomed in on David's face, calm, steady, grounded. She whispered to herself, he didn't just forgive. He transformed it. Later that evening, after the crowd dispersed, David lingered outside the cafe, looking at the mural on the wall. It displayed his quote in bold letters. You could have just served me my coffee. He traced the words gently with his fingers, lost in thought. Then a voice came from behind. Didn't think I'd ever see this. David turned, it was Tom Walters. He looked very different now. No arrogance, no slick hair, no superiority. Just a man weighed down by regret. "Tom," David said evenly. "I didn't expect to see you here." Tom nodded slowly. "I almost didn't come. But I needed to." He swallowed hard. "I wanted to say sorry, not to clear my name, but because I was wrong. I looked at you and saw everything I was taught to fear. That's on me." David's gaze softened, but he didn't speak yet. Tom continued, "I've lost my job, my reputation, but what hit me hardest wasn't any of that. It was hearing my voice in that recording. I didn't recognize myself. I sounded hateful. And I don't want to be that man anymore." David studied him for a moment, then said quietly, "Accountability hurts, Tom. But it's the only way forward." Tom nodded. "Yeah. I'm trying to learn that." He extended his hand, unsure if David would take it. After a pause, David shook it firmly. "Thank you for saying it," David said. "Now prove it." Tom nodded again, eyes glassy. "I will." He turned and walked away, quietly, humbly. No cameras. No applause. Just a man trying to rebuild his soul. That night, David sat at home again, the same window, the same city lights. Only this time, there was peace in the silence. Maria texted him. "The clip from today is trending again. But this time, people are calling it the day healing began." David smiled faintly, typing back. Then maybe it was worth it. He set his phone down, leaned back, and whispered, "Maybe forgiveness is the loudest justice." In the following weeks, the café's transformation inspired others. Restaurants, banks, and schools across Chicago began hosting Serve Everyone workshops, the movement David unknowingly started. Murals appeared across the city, hands of different colors passing a single coffee cup, beneath the words, "Equality isn't served. It's practiced." And in every one of those murals, in small print, was a simple credit. Inspired by David Okoro. The city had changed. Not because of anger. Not because of riots or hashtags. But because one man, quiet, humble, and patient, refused to answer hate with hate. That man was David Okoro. A full year had passed since that morning at Brew and Bloom Café. The leaves had returned to golden brown, and the wind carried the cool calm of autumn through the streets of Chicago. But this time, when people passed by the café, they didn't see division, they saw healing. The once controversial coffee shop had become a beacon of inclusion. Inside, the walls were decorated with paintings from local artists of every background, faces of unity, strength, and hope. Customers came from all walks of life, some just for coffee, others for the story behind it. On one side of the wall, in bold letters, stood the quote that had changed everything. "You could have just served me my coffee." And just beneath it, a small plaque read, "Dedicated to those who remind us that dignity is louder than hate." The doorbell chimed. David stepped inside quietly, dressed in a navy coat. It was the first time he'd been back since the reopening. Heads turned slightly, not out of curiosity, but out of respect. Elaine, the cafe owner, spotted him from the counter and immediately smiled. "Mr. Okoro," she said warmly, "or should I say David, the man who helped us rebuild." He chuckled softly. "Just David's fine." She handed him a cup, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. "On the house," she said. "I owe you more than one." He accepted it gratefully, looking around the cafe, now full of life. It wasn't just a place for coffee anymore. It was a community hub. A space where college students studied, elderly neighbors chatted, and strangers shared tables without suspicion. David smiled. "It's beautiful." You really did it. Elaine nodded. We did it. Outside, across the street, a group of volunteers wore shirts with the phrase #ServeEveryone. They were part of the foundation David had helped start, one that organized workshops on equality and empathy for businesses across the Midwest. Maria, now the movement's media director, walked up to him holding a camera. Smile, Mr. Okoro, she teased. Today marks our 1-year anniversary. The world needs to see where it all began. He laughed, shaking his head. You never stop filming, do you? Not when it matters, she said. Then her tone softened. You know, people still watch that first video every day. Millions of views. You gave people courage. David sipped his coffee, eyes glimmering with humility. All I did was stand still. Maria smiled. Sometimes standing still is the bravest thing you can do. Later that afternoon, David's phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, again. He answered. Hello? A calm, deep voice replied, David Okoro? This is Dr. Elaine Mendez from Northwestern University. We're organizing a leadership forum on social integrity and business ethics. We'd like you to speak as our closing guest. David blinked in surprise. Me? I'm not a public speaker. The woman chuckled. You don't need to be. You already said more in one video than most people do in a lifetime. David smiled faintly. I'll think about it. As he hung up, Maria looked at him knowingly. You're going to do it, aren't you? He sighed. Yeah. I guess the world's not done listening yet. A week later, David stood on a stage at Northwestern University. The hall was filled with students, journalists, professors, and ordinary people who'd followed his journey. He stood behind the podium, adjusting the microphone slightly. Then he began, his voice steady, not rehearsed, just real. A year ago, I walked into a café and walked out with a lesson. I learned that prejudice hides in the smallest actions, a stare, a doubt, a refusal. But I also learned that dignity has power. The power to reveal truth without shouting, the power to heal without revenge. We don't fight hate by mirroring it. We fight it by being exactly what it can't understand, calm, kind, and unshaken. He paused, looking across the sea of faces, many wiping tears. If one conversation, one video, or one moment of grace can change a heart, then maybe, just maybe, we're not as divided as they want us to believe. The audience rose to their feet. Applause thundered through the hall, long, emotional, heartfelt. Maria captured it all, zooming in on his face as he smiled modestly, then stepped back from the podium. Later that evening, David walked alone by the Chicago River. The city lights shimmered on the water's surface, the air crisp with early winter. He took out his phone, scrolling through the messages, hundreds of thank you notes, support comments, and news articles about his speech. Then one message caught his eye. It was from Tom Walters. David, I watched your speech tonight. I'm working at a community outreach center now, helping people find jobs. Every day I tell them your story. You were right. Accountability hurts. But it's also the beginning of grace. Thank you for forgiving me, even when I didn't deserve it. David read it twice, then smiled quietly. He typed a short reply. Proud of your growth, Tom. Keep going. He pocketed the phone and looked out at the water, whispering to himself, maybe we all just need someone to believe we can change. Months passed. The Serve Everyone Foundation expanded to other cities, Detroit, Atlanta, Los Angeles. David's calm face became the emblem of quiet strength. He was invited to panels, featured in magazines, and even honored by the city council. But he never let fame change him. He still rode the train. Still tipped generously. still walked into cafes with the same quiet smile. One afternoon, a little boy at a coffee shop pointed at him shyly. "Hey, you're the man from the video." David laughed gently. "Yeah, that's me." The boy grinned. "My teacher showed it to us in class. She said you're a hero." David knelt down to his level. "I'm not a hero, kid. I just didn't let someone else decide my worth." The boy nodded seriously. "I won't either." David smiled, patting his shoulder. "Good. That's how we change the world, one choice at a time." That night, Maria released a short documentary titled "The Man Who Changed the Conversation." It opened with the footage of that first confrontation, then transitioned to scenes of unity, the murals, the cafe, the community gatherings, and finally David's speech. The final narration played softly over cinematic shots of the city skyline at dusk. Sometimes the world changes not through noise, but through silence that refuses to bend. Sometimes strength doesn't roar, it simply stands. The music swelled as David was shown walking along the river, hands in his pockets, eyes calm. In a world that rushes to judge, may we learn to pause. To look again. To serve one another, not out of fear, but out of humanity. The screen faded to black. Then, in white letters, appeared the closing line. "This is Buchi Grind, stories that keep you watching." In the end, David didn't need revenge. He didn't need to shout, or prove his worth to anyone. He just stood tall, and let the truth do the talking. That's what real strength looks like. Not in how loud you are, but in how deeply your silence speaks. So the next time someone looks down on you, remember David. Remember that your calm can be louder than their hate. And your dignity? It can change more than just one moment, it can change hearts. If this story moved you, don't let it stop here. Hit that like button to help more people see this message. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their worth. And subscribe for more real, powerful stories that reveal the truth about courage, injustice, and redemption. This is Buchi Grind, stories that keep you watching.